The quadratic equation here can be a little intimidating, don't you think? Look at all those letters, look at all those numbers, the square root, the positive, negative. It can be intimidating, and I get it. So in this video here, I'm going to introduce you to the quadratic equation and provide you with lots of examples to really help you better understand how this is used. Welcome to Purely Persistent. I'm Michelle. Now, the quadratic equation is definitely not one that you're using every day, right? What it is used for is when you're trying to figure out a parabola. Now, a parabola is basically like a little U, or it can be a U or a little mountain. And basically what it's doing is it's figuring out where it crosses the little X line. And that's why it says plus or minus. So we're actually finding out two answers, not just one. The parabola, or rather quadratic equation, is used quite a bit in physics. An example might be throwing a baseball. Throw it up just a little bit and then it works its way back down. Now, if you appreciate YouTube math videos, I want you to give this video a big thumbs up. Show me a little love with your thumbs up. So there are some tests or some classes where you're going to have to memorize this equation. For example, the HiSET test. Now, it's kind of a big equation, kind of complicated. So here is a mnemonic device that will really help you memorize this equation. Okay, so take yourself back to kindergarten and we have Pop Goes the Weasel, right? A penny for a spool of thread, a penny for a needle. That's the way the money goes. Pop goes the weasel, right? So we are going to sing the quadratic equation to the Pop Goes the Weasel song. Okay, here we go. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Yay! Okay. We're going to do it one more time, and I actually want you to sing it with me, okay? Pay no attention to the other people that might be in the room with you. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so here we have an equation. We have 3x squared minus 1x, which we know could be written just as x, minus 10. So what we need to do is we need to put this in the correct order, but it's actually already in it. So you want to start with the x squared, then have the x, and then have your plain number that's all by itself. So whatever equation you have, you need to rearrange it so that it fits this format. And then we have a, b, and c. So a is whatever's attached to the x squared. So in this case, a is equal to 3. B is whatever is attached to just the regular x, and in this case, it's negative 1. And then c is whatever number is all by itself, which is negative 10. Now, we'll take our quadratic equation and all of those little letters or those variables we are going to insert with these numbers right here. So we have x is equal to negative b. So we have negative b, which is negative 1. So I'll just put the negative 1 in parentheses, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So we have negative 1 squared minus 4a, which is 3, and c, which is negative 10. Bring that over a little more. And then we have that times 2a. So a is 3. Now you really want to make sure that you understand the order of operations, which is PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And by knowing the order of operations, it will help you answer this type of question. So let's get to it. So we have x is equal to -1, or negative times -1. So we know that when we're multiplying a negative and a negative, you can think of like two lines, two negatives, it turns it into a positive. But that only works with multiplication and division. And this case is we're multiplying. So we have, it's just going to be 1 plus or minus the square root, okay, -1 squared. So again, when we have a -1 times a -1, it turns into just a plain 1, okay? All right, now we have, let's pay no attention to the negatives at this point. So we have 4 times 3, which is 12. 12 times 10 is going to be 120. And look, we have a negative times a negative, negative times a negative, which is a positive. So that's going to be plus 120 all over 2 times 3, which is 6. Let's simplify it just a little bit more. X is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root. 1 plus 120 is 121 all over 6. Now we can simplify it a little bit more. 1 plus or minus the square root of 121 is simply 11 over 6. Okay, so now is the time where we're going to take our little equation here and we're going to break it into two. We're going to have a positive and a negative. So we have 1 plus 11 over 6, and we also have 1 minus 11 over 6. So 1 plus 11 is 12 over 6, and we can simply simplify 12 over 6 is just equal to 2. And then 1 minus 11 is negative 10 over 6. And we can reduce that down just a little bit. We have negative 5 over 3, because 2 goes into both of them. Reduce that again. And we have negative 1 and 2/3. So that is going to be our answer. So x is equal to 2 and x is equal to negative 1 and 2/3. So here we have 12x plus 5 minus 9x squared. Okay, now if we were to just plug those right in like this, we would get the answer wrong. What we have to do is we have to make sure that that x squared is first. The x squared followed by the x followed by just the plain number. So what we need to do is we need to just rearrange it. So we're going to take negative 9x and we're going to bring it to the front. So now we have 9x squared negative 9x squared plus 12x plus 5. And now it's in our proper order. We have x squared, x, and just a plain variable. So we can put the numbers right in with our variables here. So we have negative 9 right here. Attached to the x is 12. And the number that's all by itself here is going to be 5. And now we take these and we plug them into our equation, which is right here. So x is equal to negative b. B here is 12. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So that would be 12 squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 9, times c, which is 5. And then all over 2 times a. A is negative 9. Okay, so we have x is equal to negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared. 12 squared is 144. Okay, now we have 4 times 9 times 5. So if I'm going to do this just as mental math, going 4 times 9, which is 36, 36 times 5, that's kind of tricky for me. So what I like to do is simplify this to easier numbers. So if I know that 4 times 5 is 20, right? And 20 is a lot easier for me to multiply than 36. So I can go 4 times 5 is 20. 20 times 9 is basically what's 2 times 9 and add a 0. So that's 18 and add a 0, 180. Now, notice here I have a plus and a plus. Sorry, a negative and a negative, which turns it into a plus, right? So we're going to go 144 plus 180 all over 2 times negative 9, which is going to be negative 18. Let's simplify again. X is equal to negative 12 plus or minus the square root. So 144 plus 180 is 324 over negative 18. Okay, X is equal to negative 12 plus or minus, quick, what's the square root of 324? 18, you're right. It's okay. I'd use a calculator too. So we have plus or minus 18 over 18. Now's the time where we break it into 2. So we have negative 12 plus 18 over 18. And we have negative 12 minus 18 over 18. So negative 12 plus 18, we could kind of move that around, and it's basically just 18 minus 12, which is 6. 6 over 18 just simplifies down to 1/3. And then we have negative 12 minus 18, which when you're on the number line, you have a negative and you're subtracting a negative. Basically, it's just kind of like adding, but keeping that negative, okay? So we have negative 12 minus 18, which ends up being negative 30 over 18. Now, both of these are even numbers, so I'm going to go negative 15 over 9, and then I can just simplify it from there. So in order to simplify this, I can go 9 goes into 15. So 9 goes into 15 once. 9 to 1 is 9. 15 minus 9 is 6. So I'm going to have 1 as my whole number over 9. And then we have 6. That's if you want to do it by hand and you don't want to use a calculator, but feel free to use a calculator if you're permitted to. So I can even reduce it down a little bit more because 3 goes into 6 and 9. So I have 1 is equal to 3. 1 is equal to 2/3. But remember, it was a negative, so we need to make sure that we keep it a negative. So I have negative 1 2/3, and then I have 1/3, and that would be the answer. Now, if you need to take your fractions and switch it into a decimal, make sure that you take a look at how exactly to use it on your calculator, how to toggle back and forth. And I actually have a video if you're taking the GED HiSET or TASC test. Right here, I'll show you exactly how to do that on your calculator. So here we have negative 2x squared equals, negative parentheses 9x minus 10. Okay, so we need to solve this a little bit and break it down so that it's the x squared, the x, and then the variables. So we need to do a little bit of pre-work before we can plug it into our quadratic equation. So the first thing I'm going to do, I can just leave this over here by itself, that's fine. And I'm going to take, so I'll just go 2x squared equals, I'm going to take this negative and put it into my equation here. So negative, so it could be -1. So negative times 9x is just going to be negative 9x. And then we have a negative times a negative. And remember, when you're multiplying two negatives together, it turns it into a positive. So I have plus 10. So now I can do this one of two ways. I can take the negative 2x squared and put it on this side here, or I can take the negative 9x and the 10 and put it over onto that side. What I'm going to do is, I like to limit my negatives a little bit if I can. So I'm going to just take this negative 2x squared and I'm going to put it on the other side. So I'm going to add 2x squared to both sides. And that's going to cancel out. So I'm left with 2x squared. Put in my correct equation, right? 2x squared minus 9x plus 10. And now I have it in the equation format that I need in order to solve the problem. So I have my A is equal to 2. B is equal to -9. And C is equal to 10. And now to put it in right into our equation here. So we have x is equal to -b. So we have -9. So if that's a negative and this is a negative, it's going to be a positive. So 9 plus or minus the square root of -9 squared minus 4a, which is 2, and c, which is 10. All over 2a, which is 2. Okay, so let's solve it a little bit here. So x is equal to 9 plus or minus the square root 9 squared, -9 squared. So -9 times -9, I have my two negatives again, is just going to be 81 I mean. 81 minus 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 10 is 80. All over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so I have x is equal to 9 plus or minus the square root. 81 minus 80, it's just 1 over 4. X is equal to 9 plus or minus the square root of 1. So what number times what number equals 1? 1. 1 over 4. Okay, so let's break it down. So we have 9 plus 1 over 4. 9 minus 1 over 4. So 9 plus 1 is equal to 10 over 4. And we can reduce that down. 2 goes into both of them. So we have 5 over 2, which can just be simplified to 2.5. And then we have 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 over 4. Reduce that down, and we have 2. So our answers for this one, we have 2 and 2.5. All right, here's another one. X times, or parentheses, 3x minus 16, close parentheses, equals -16. Okay, so this one, we know that we can't add x's squared, and just plain numbers. We know that we can't add those together, right? but we can multiply. And so that's what we're doing here in this case. So we basically need to go x times 3x. So when we multiply an x times an x, that's when it gets to be x squared, right? So we have 3x squared minus x times negative 16 is going to be negative 16x. And then we have equals negative 16. Now we need everything to be on one side, right? So let's take our negative 16 and add it to both sides. And we end up with 3x squared minus 16x plus 16, and this just cancels out over here. So then we get a is equal to 3, b is equal to negative 16, and c is equal to 16 as well. Plug these right into our equation, and we get x is equal to negative b. So 16, negative 16 ends up being a positive 16 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So we have negative 16 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, and c, which is 16, all over 2 times a, which is 3. Okay, so x is equal to 16 plus or minus the square root. Okay, 16 squared. Let's get our calculator out. So I put in negative 16, and we're going to just square that, and we get 256. Okay, I have to tell you something. My calculator says negative 256. And so that's why we can't always depend upon our calculator, because you know, and I know, that when we multiply two negative numbers, it should turn it into a positive number, despite what my calculator says. So 256 minus, okay, 3 times 4 is 12. 12 times 16, let's do it. 12 times 16 is equal to 192. All over 2 times 3, which is 6. So I have x is equal to 16 plus or minus the square root 256 minus 192. So 256 minus 192 is equal to 64. Whew, that's a much more manageable number, right? I don't need my calculator anymore. Over 6. So I have x is equal to 16 plus or minus, so what times itself equals 64? 8 over 6. Okay, I was getting a little nervous with some of those big numbers, so I'm really thankful that it's worked its way down to some easier ones, right? Okay, so we have 16 plus 8 over 6, and then we have 16 minus 8 over 6. So 16 plus 8 is 24 over 6. And look at that, 24 over 6, a nice even 4. And then we have 16 minus 8, which is just 8. 8 over 6. We can reduce that down. 2 goes into both, so we have 4 over 3, which can reduce down to 1 and 1/3. So our two answers for this one, we have 4 and we have 1 and 1/3. Now, hopefully you have a little better understanding of the quadratic equation. Two things I want you to remember. First of all, if you have to memorize this equation, use the Pop Goes the Weasel song. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The second thing to remember is you need to make sure that the equation, before you put it into the quadratic equation, is in the proper order. The x squared, the x, and then just the regular number. And that will determine your a, b, and c to put it into the equation. Now, if you have any other math topics that you would like me to cover here on this video, comment down below. I love doing math videos. I love doing math problems. I'm one of those crazy people. So just comment down below and let me know. Now, of course, if anyone hasn't told you today, you are enough. You are an important person in this world. I believe in you. Make sure that you believe in yourself too. Go have a beautiful day. Thanks, guys. Love you. Bye-bye. Peace.